The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good day to everybody, and welcome to the first Wellness Matters at FICO webinar of the year, Why It Matters, What Your Blood Pressure Says About You. It's Carl Rudo. I'm the Client Relationship Manager with the Wellness Matters at FICO program. And I'd like to welcome Sarah Sutton back, our coach and certified personal trainer with Wellness Matters, to walk us through our webinar today. And if anyone has any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to use the question box on your GoToWebinar screen, the square that pops up on the for the meeting. Within that, there will be a question box. You can write your questions there into the question box, and we will be happy to answer any questions that you have. I'm going to turn it over now to Sarah, who's going to take us through today's webinar.
All right, thanks, Carl, and welcome to everyone. First, to frame out our talk today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what is blood pressure, why is it important, and what is high blood pressure. So first, once we define those, we'll then move into what are your risk factors for having high blood pressure, also known as hypertension. And then prevention and treatment factors. What can we do to manage this condition? And finally, as always, I will end with a coaching challenge. What will you plan to do in the next 24 to 48 hours to already start taking action to move your health forward? So please be thinking about that as we go through. All right, first we're going to talk about why blood pressure matters. Blood pressure measures the force pushing outward on your arterial walls as your heart pumps blood and pushes it through your body to circulate oxygen. Okay, so why is this important? First of all, your organs and tissues need oxygen to survive. Healthy blood pressure prevents the heart from working so hard and the walls of your blood vessels from overstretching and becoming injured, which is what happens when you have hypertension, which increases your risk for hardening of the arteries. This is known as atherosclerosis. Heart attack, stroke, heart failure, kidney failure, peripheral artery vascular disease. There are so many conditions that therefore spring from this. So that's what blood pressure is. Now, how do you interpret an actual blood pressure reading? There are two numbers. The first, known as your systolic number, that's the top number. It measures the pressure in the arteries when the heart beats or the heart muscle contracts and starts pumping blood to circulate in your body. The second number, known as your diastolic number, is the lower of the two numbers, and this measures the pressure in the arteries between heartbeats when the heart muscle is resting and refilling with blood. Now, according to the American Heart Association, for adults, normal blood pressure reading would be less than 120 for that top number, systolic number, and less than 80 for diastolic. Usually you'll hear it as 120 over 80. We want both those numbers to be at or below in order to be considered at normal blood pressure. Then, as we're getting into the risk for blood pressure, the quote-unquote pre-hypertension category would be having that top systolic number anywhere between 120 and 139, or the bottom diastolic number, 80 to 89. So in this case, doctors are just looking for one of those numbers to be in those categories for it to then be labeled as pre-hypertension. Stage 1 hypertension next would be 140 to 159 for that systolic number, or 90 to 99 in the diastolic. And finally, stage 2 is 160 plus for systolic or 100 plus for diastolic. Now, one single high reading does not necessarily mean you have high blood pressure, but a consistent high reading means your doctor will want to start treatment, which we'll get to later. And that'll probably be a combination of lifestyle changes and medication. The AHA recommends a blood pressure screening at your annual physical, or at the very least every 2 years if your blood pressure tends to be normal, because about 1 in 3 U.S. adults has high blood pressure. So that's pretty significant of a condition. Now, usually people will ask, well, which is more important to pay attention to? Typically, more attention is given to that top number, the systolic blood pressure, as a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease, at least for people over 50 years old. Because in most people, systolic blood pressure rises steadily with age due to increasing stiffness of large arteries and long-term buildup of plaque. All right, so what is high blood pressure? First, let's talk about how healthy arteries are made of muscle and a semi-flexible tissue that stretches like elastic when the heart pumps blood through them. The more forcefully that blood pumps, the more the arteries stretch to allow that blood to flow. And over time, the tissue that makes up the walls of arteries gets stretched beyond its healthy limit and therefore damaged. So this creates problems in several ways. Vascular weaknesses. The overstretching creates weak places in the blood vessels, making them more prone to rupture and can lead to hemorrhagic strokes and aneurysms. It also can lead to vascular scarring. The overstretching can cause tiny tears in the blood vessels that leave scar tissue on the walls of the arteries and veins. These tears in the scar tissue are like nets and can catch debris such as cholesterol or blood cells traveling in the bloodstream. You can also be at risk for increased risk of blood clots. Trapped blood can form clots that can narrow and sometimes block the arteries. And these clots sometimes break off and block vessels and the blood supply to different parts of the body, which often results in heart attacks or strokes. You can also have increased plaque buildup. The same principle applies to our blood flow. Cholesterol and plaque build up at the damaged sites in the arteries and cause the blood flow to become limited or even cut off altogether. As this happens, pressure is increased on the rest of the system, forcing the heart to work even harder to deliver blood to your body. And additionally, if pieces of plaque break off and travel to other parts of the body, or if the buildup completely blocks the vessel, then heart attacks and strokes occur. You might also experience tissue and organ damage as a result of high blood pressure. Ultimately, the arteries on the other side of the blockage do not receive enough freshly oxygenated blood, which results in tissue damage, such as to the kidneys, eyes, and brain. Remember, your blood pressure is helping to circulate that blood, that oxygen-rich blood, to your tissues and organs. And finally, one of the other repercussions of high blood pressure is an increased workload on the circulatory system. When the vessels are clogged and narrow, the pressure is much greater behind the clog, and the heart has to pump harder, which can result in damage to the heart itself and also heart failure. All right, so if left untreated, what does this cause specifically? Damage to the heart and coronary arteries, including heart attack, heart disease, congestive heart failure, and atherosclerosis. They can cause stroke, kidney damage, vision loss, erectile dysfunction, memory loss, fluid in the lungs, angina, and peripheral artery disease. I think some of the things that most people don't think about is specifically the vision loss, the erectile dysfunction, memory loss. All can be tied to high blood pressure consequences. You know, uncontrolled high blood pressure can injure or kill you. It's sometimes called the silent killer because it has no symptoms, so you may not be aware that it's damaging your arteries, heart, and other organs. That's why it's so critical to get those regular readings. Think of it this way. The effects of uncontrolled hypertension quickly go from abstract to real when you have a heart attack or stroke. Now, this is certainly not to scare you, but rather to encourage you to take high blood pressure very seriously. I mean, consider, have you known someone who suffered a heart attack or stroke? What were they like afterward? How was their family affected? This is life-changing stuff. All right, so now that we know what blood pressure is and what high blood pressure is and some of the consequences, let's talk next about all natural prevention and treatments. The exact causes of high blood pressure are not known, but several factors and conditions may play a role in its development. Now, before I move any further, you'll see at the bottom of this slide there is a risk calculator. I'm noting it now because I want you to have time to jot down the actual link. I was not able to get this any more concise than this because it, anything more concise does not actually lead you to this risk calculator. It's at the American Heart Association website at heart.org, but it would take you some searching. So please go ahead if you're interested in jotting that down because that'll be important to note later. The risk calculator allows you to enter current lifestyle info and assess risks both before and after making changes. So if that's something you're interested in, go ahead and jot that down. So some of the risk factors: smoking and inhaling secondhand smoke, being overweight or obese, lack of physical activity, excessive sugar and salt consumption and poor diet. So let me pause here because I want to make a note about the sugar versus salt debate because you probably have heard, oh, you need to reduce sodium in your diet to help with blood pressure. Studies are showing more and more that added sugar, so added sugar excluding natural sugars found in fruits, vegetables, and certain milk products. Okay, we're talking about added sugar from processed products is way more of a concern than salt ever was. And in some cases, salt may actually be okay. What we were always talking about anyway was salt from processed products as well, as opposed to adding salt from the salt shaker at the table. It's that processing that in so many ways damages things. So back to the added sugars. Names for added sugars that you can look at on a food label would be agave syrup. Yeah, even that's considered, quote unquote natural, but it's still an added sugar. Brown sugar, corn sweetener, corn syrup, any sugar molecule ending in ose. So that would be your dextrose, fructose, glucose, lactose, maltose, sucrose. The OSE is your indication right there that that's some kind of a sugar. Also high fructose corn syrup, fruit juice concentrates, honey, invert sugar, malt sugar, raw sugar, the word sugar. Sometimes you might just see syrup as opposed to, the marketers have gotten pretty savvy in not putting high fructose corn syrup in there, and maybe it has been processed slightly differently, but if it says syrup, then that's some form of sugar, and molasses. So that would be an indication about sugars. They're virtually in every processed product, from sodas, which are really your #1 source for added sugars, to cereals, even good cereals, quote unquote. You really got to look at the label. Breads, all kinds of condiments like ketchups, salad dressing, and then of course the obvious ones like desserts. Also, often when a retailer lowers the sodium content, they enhance the flavor with sugars. It's kind of crazy like that. The average American eats 4 to 8 times the amount recommended for added sugars. So even if you think you're eating well, I know at one point I was surprised to realize when I started scrupulously looking at labels that, wow, there really is sugar in this, and then I would go out and try and look for the lowest sugar ketchup I possibly could. Same with salad dressings. I mean, it's really, I went to a more natural whole bread from a real bakery. So anyway, if you think sugar substitutes are okay, I also want to warn you to think again. Sugar substitutes have been shown to affect your gut bacteria and provoke an inflammatory response similar to sugar overload. So finally, not only does sugar have direct effect on damaging blood vessels, but it makes you more likely to have glucose intolerance or diabetes, which along with prehypertensive numbers or hypertensive numbers contributes to something known as metabolic syndrome. So enough about that. That was some surprising new research that's been coming out, so I wanted to throw that into the mix. So back to the slide. Other risk factors would include excessive alcohol consumption, which would be more than 1 to 2 drinks a day. Usually they say 1 drink for women, 2 drinks for men. Stress, older age, gender, because men are more likely until age 45, and then women are more likely after age 65. Genetics, such as being African American and family history, and certain diseases make you more susceptible. Chronic kidney disease, adrenal and thyroid disorders, and sleep apnea. Note that the first half of this list are completely lifestyle related. So that's certainly something that we're going to be focusing on for the rest of the webinar. So finally, again, back to that risk calculator. Like I said, it allows you to enter current lifestyle information and assess risks both before and after making changes. So for example, it'll actually, depending on how you enter your information, it might say something like you are at 2 times risk of having a heart attack. And then if you decide you're going to make a certain change, it'll adjust that risk. It's really pretty eye-opening and also helps you figure out where to target your next steps. So hopefully you've had a chance to write down that risk calculator. All right, since prevention and treatment protocols are so similar, I mentioned them both together here, and we'll explain what each means exactly. So first of all, what does eat a healthy diet mean? So that would be your fruits, vegetables, whole grain, high fiber foods, beans, lean cuts of meat and fish, especially salmon and trout, which contain omega-3 fatty acids, low in saturated and especially trans fats, along with added sugars that we mentioned previously. Bottom line, your plate model, which if you look up plate model on the internet, usually you've got a few different graphics that come up. But basically, if you were to cut your plate into different compartments, you ideally want about 1/4 of your plate to be a lean protein, 1/4 of your plate to be some kind of a ideally whole grain, some kind of a carb, basically a whole grain or a starchy vegetable. And really, we're ideally looking for about half of the plate to be filled with vegetables, good, wholesome vegetables, like more of your broccoli and spinach, as opposed to things like green beans. So that's, if you're eating that way, that's how we know that we're getting that balance that's recommended. It's really about eating real foods rather than processed. All right, next, top recommendation would include regular physical activity. So what does that mean? That means to accumulate 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity, which would be just brisk walking, done in at least 10-minute increments. Really, ideally, we're looking for that 30 to 40-minute bouts. But that would be, 150 minutes would be your 5 days of 30 minutes, so most days of the week, along with stretching and strength training all major muscle groups 2 times a week. Next, maintain a healthy weight. Excess weight makes your heart work harder. What we're talking about here is a body mass index, which is a measurement of height to weight, below 25. And even a 10-pound loss can make a real difference. So I really want to encourage you with this one. Manage stress. Stress makes the heart beat faster and it constricts blood vessels. Examples of stress management modalities might be meditation, or really what's behind meditation is noticing and letting go of thoughts, so not attaching to those outcomes. Humor, getting out in nature, or simply deep breathing. So many stress management modalities, such as meditation or yoga, they all come back to just noticing and breathing deeply. Kind of the interesting thing especially is that particularly your exhale helps to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your relaxation response. So by just focusing on maybe 3 breaths in and 4 to 6 breaths out, that will help to really calm that stress response. Next, avoid tobacco smoke. Smoking temporarily increases blood pressure, plus it affects fatty buildups in the vessels. Now, smoking is often associated with excess alcohol consumption and lack of exercise, so they really tend to go hand in hand. Basically, don't smoke. Enough said. All right, next, limit caffeine. Really what we're talking about here is no more than 2 small cups of coffee a day. check your blood pressure before and within a half hour after consuming your caffeinated beverage. If it increases by 5 or 10 points, you could be caffeine sensitive. So it might be even more important to, dare I say, cut out caffeine completely. As somebody who just in the last few years has done so, now of course I don't count chocolate as caffeine, you're really not going to miss it. You know, after the initial, you're really not going to miss it because it gives you that false high anyway. All right, finally, if you drink, limit alcohol. What I mean here is limit alcohol to no more than 1 a day for women and 2 a day for men. I mentioned that previously. Serving size is a 12-ounce beer, 5-ounce wine, and you cannot save up for the weekend. So you might be thinking, oh, well, that gives me 7 drinks or 14 drinks. So I'll, have 5 on a Saturday night. No, if you've attended my, previous webinar on webinars, then you can see that that actually has its own separate heart disease risks and heart attack risks. All right, finally, comply with medication prescriptions. You may wonder why this one is showing up on the slide about all natural prevention and treatment. Of course, we highly encourage you to manage your blood pressure through lifestyle behaviors, as they can make a huge impact. And the reality is you may still need to be medicated, especially if hypertension for you is genetic, or to control hypertension immediately while you make those changes. Always discuss your options with your doctor. The thing is, not managing your medication needs is a separate risk factor for those consequences of high blood pressure that I mentioned previously. And similarly, lifestyle factors can also enhance the effectiveness of your blood pressure medications. I thought that was pretty interesting when I researched this. So not managing your medication needs is a separate risk factor, and lifestyle factors that I talked so much about previously can also enhance the effectiveness of your medications if you need to be medicated. So always discuss that with your doctor. All right, here's a quiz to check if you've been paying attention. Which of the following is most important for treating high blood pressure? A, eating bananas, B, meditating, C, cutting sugar, or D, losing weight? So let me go through them one at a time. A, eating bananas. Bananas contain potassium, which helps to counteract the effects of sodium. Most people don't get enough potassium, so this might be an important one, and it can also be found in baked potatoes with the skin on and yogurt, among other food sources. B, meditating. Meditating may help reduce stress, which can affect blood pressure, but as of yet, there's no prescription, we'll say, for using meditation for stress reduction. We just know that it helps reduce it. C, cutting sugar. Now, I went into this quite a bit of length in a previous slide. Added sugars are thought to be a new contributing factor to all sorts of heart issues, much more than salt. However, if I had to pick one, it would be lose weight. Why is this so important? If you think about it, so many other lifestyle factors are involved. Eating well, exercising, and it can have a significant effect on blood pressure. However, of course, we know that losing weight isn't always easy. So I recommend working with a coach to help you come up with a doable plan that fits your particular life circumstances, one small step at a time. This is what we coaches excel at, are those small steps so that you feel like you're getting traction, on a new lifestyle, but it's meant to be done in a doable, realistic way for your life based on your circumstances and your needs. So definitely contact a coach to work with you on that. All right, let's make this a little bit more personal. What is your blood pressure saying about you? Your blood pressure, it's truly an indication of your health and wellness, because high blood pressure symptoms are silent. Getting your blood pressure checked regularly is a way of telling you where you're truly at so you can take steps to be as healthy as you can be. For example, is your blood pressure saying you eat well, exercise regularly, and are managing stress well, and therefore should do some cartwheels to celebrate, as you'll note in that first photo there on this slide? Or is your blood pressure saying it's time to get support, maybe partnering up with someone for accountability in making lifestyle changes, or joining a weight loss group? Or is your blood pressure saying you need to take your family's needs to heart, because taking steps now will mean you'll be around for a long time to come? Or finally, in some other pretty distinct way, maybe a concern that's been niggling at your mind or not feeling as well as you know you could, in some distinct way, is your blood pressure saying you've been fighting yourself for too long and it's time to call a time out? All right, so here's my coaching challenge. I told you this would be coming. Start somewhere. Start anywhere. Let's consider all that we've talked about. So first, we mentioned, what is blood pressure? Why is it important in our bodies to keep our nourishing our tissues and organs with oxygen? And what is high blood pressure? All the consequences, that leads to as a result. We also talked about the risk factors, and also I specifically went into sugar since that's kind of a new risk factor in addition to salt. Having a sedentary lifestyle, not managing stress, all of those things. Then we talked more specifically about all natural treatments and preventative qualities. So, eating that healthy diet, getting regular physical activity, certainly also composed of all of that would be the healthy weight. Managing your stress, not smoking, not drinking too much caffeine or alcohol, and complying with medications. Those were some of the more pronounced things, that go into managing your blood pressure well. So finally, this is your challenge. What is one goal that you will create for yourself and complete in the next 24 to 48 hours? Let me offer you some ideas so you can already start making those changes. Maybe take a look at everything that you're eating, and by scrutinizing nutrition labels, you might identify some of the easy fixes for reducing sugar in your diet, like I mentioned previously that I was surprised when I started really looking as well, and finding some easy fixes. Or talk to a coworker about walking at lunchtime a few specific days during the week. You might set an audible alarm to remind yourself to stop throughout the day and take 10 deep breaths to help with stress management. Or you could set a limit on weekend cocktails or the number of cups of caffeinated coffee you have. And of course, you might actually just simply set a goal to contact a health coach provided through your company's wellness services to help you create a plan. So what specifically will you put into place moving forward? I'd love if you really were to consider this and actually share with somebody so he or she can hold you accountable in making some of these important changes for your life and your blood pressure. All right, that's what I have to share for today. So as Carl asked, if you have any questions, hopefully you've been writing them into that chat box, and we can field those now and spend a couple more minutes if you do have those questions. So I'll pass it back to you, Carl, if there are any questions.
Thank you. We actually have one so far. It's going back to the question around sugars. Someone was curious about, how would they treat sugar alcohols? So the type of sugar alcohols that are put in, say, Atkins bars and other types of things like that. That's a good question. I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on all of this, but from what I understand, you still have to take that seriously. Really, it's almost like artificial sweeteners, where they can technically say, oh, it's got 0 grams of sugar. That's not really true. It's made up of chemicals. And we're just finding out more and more that chemicals are wreaking more havoc with our bodies than ever before, and we don't actually know the extent to all of it. So, there's something, it's coming from somewhere to make it sweet. So I would, however many grams of sugar alcohols in there, because usually that's what they'll say is like sugar is however, say 5 grams, and then there will be an asterisk, and then it'll say sugar alcohols underneath it is more like 13 grams. I would actually consider that all sugar. That's my personal opinion, but I'm not a professional expert
on this, you could always also ask a registered dietitian.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is, what is the amount of recommended exercise again?
Sure, it's 150 minutes a week. So what that ends up being is about 5 days of 30 minutes. That's specifically for your aerobic exercise, which would be equivalent to moderate brisk walking. Now, if you are a jogger, you can technically get away with about half that. So if you jog, you could get away with 75 minutes, which would be about, 3 sessions a week. That's minimums that we're talking about, because really it goes up from there. It could be 150 to 300 minutes, really. So that would be more like your 30 to 60 minutes. That's technically just your cardio. And then otherwise you want to be stretching as much as possible, usually right after exercise and at any point during the day. We just, as we get older, our flexibility really starts to weaken. Maybe take a yoga session, that kind of thing. And then strength training, all major muscle groups, twice a week. Those are the national recommendations. But as with any change that you're considering making, some of these are recommendations, so they can be daunting. Just like I mentioned, the plate model, that's the optimum that we're all shooting for. How that plays out realistically for your life, that's where working with a coach to help you make those small changes to build up would be really valuable.
Great, thank you. To build on a comment you just made, what is the relationship between muscle building and blood pressure?
With muscle building and blood pressure, that's a good question. I think, so here's something that I recently learned with regard to fasting blood glucose. I don't know if this would be related to blood pressure, but the interesting thing is that when you have more muscle in your body, you're actually able to use your fasting glucose better. Your insulin is more sensitive to that. So I would think that that would be the same as well for blood pressure. Oftentimes we think that, if we want to manage any heart condition, then it's all about the cardio. It's not just about that. Managing, first of all, having more muscle in your body results in a higher metabolism, which helps you manage your weight. So that has, then a trickle-down effect to any heart issues. And it helps you just be more functional. Just if you think about it, if you have stronger legs, you're able to climb the stairs or do those daily activities as well as any cardio that you choose that much easier. So those might be some reasons, but I don't technically know what the mechanism is behind having more muscle on your body and blood pressure.
Great, thank you. Well, we don't have any more questions. I want to thank everybody for attending today, and look out for the next invite for our next webinar, which is scheduled for April. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.